Good evening, campers. I hope you're all okay and enjoyed Chantel's talk yesterday. I've got another story to tell you this evening, and it's a true story, and it's about a cave rescue mission. You might have heard of this story as it was in the newspapers and it was known across the world. But on the 23rd of June 2018, so 2 years ago, a group of 12 young boys went exploring in the caves in a place called Thailand. And these young boys, they were footballers and they enjoyed playing football. And they enjoyed exploring the caves in Thailand, and they were having a lovely day out exploring and having lots of fun. But suddenly there was a really big storm that caused the entrance of the cave where they were in. So they were inside a cave, but this storm, and there was a lot of heavy rain, it blocked the entrance of the cave. So the boys had no way of getting out of the cave. In fact, they were trapped inside the cave. Now they had no food with them, they had no clothes, they were trapped. And they couldn't get out, and they hadn't got anything with them, and they couldn't even make contact with people who were back in their homes and their houses. Now the people at home, they were beginning to worry because they hadn't heard from these boys, and they were expecting them back home after their day of exploring, and they were trapped in the cave. So the families at home were really beginning to worry. They sent out some search parties to look for the missing boys. Some people who would go out and they would look in the places that they thought maybe the boys had explored. And these search parties, they couldn't find the boys, and no contact had been made with the boys trapped in the cave for 1 whole week. That's a long time, isn't it? No contact for 1 whole week with their families. Their families didn't know where these young boys were. They had no food, no clean clothes. They were just trapped inside a cave. And people across the world began to hear about this. It was on the TV, it was on the news. Lots of people were hearing about this story of these 12 boys trapped inside this cave. Now, one of the boys that was trapped inside the cave, he's sponsored by a charity called Compassion. You may sponsor some children through Compassion. I sponsor a little boy and a little girl through Compassion, and Compassion is a charity that will help children and their families, send them to school, give them clean clothes, help them with providing food. They can go to the doctor if they need to see a doctor and get medicine. Compassion helps these families and supports them. So this little boy was sponsored through Compassion and his family. So Compassion started to pray for these children when they knew that these boys were missing. Compassion sent round prayer requests so that people could pray that these boys would be found. And Compassion, they also teach the children and the families about Jesus, so it's a really important charity. So lots and lots of people started praying for these boys, started praying that they would be kept safe and that they would be found. So Adan is the name of one of the boys who was trapped in the cave, and this was the little boy who Compassion sponsors. And he was the only English speaker trapped inside the cave. All his friends trapped inside the cave, they didn't speak English. So Adan was the only boy that spoke English. So on the 2nd of July, when some British divers found the boys in this cave, these divers were searching around all the different caves, and they discovered these boys trapped in this cave on the 2nd of July. Adan was able to talk to these divers, and because he spoke English, he was able to communicate with them and talk to them. Now the rescue team, the divers, they had to plan different routes to help the boys get out of the caves. They had to do things like teach the boys different diving skills, because they were in a lot of water. They were deep in the sea. So these boys had to learn different skills to help them dive, to go down and get out of the cave. The divers, the British divers who were there to rescue the boys, even thought of things like taking water out of the cave or drilling holes to make a new hole so that the boys could get out of the cave and be rescued. Now, the British divers needed to get the boys out before the next heavy rainfall, because if there was more rain that came along, the boys would be trapped, and they'd be trapped in the cave for even longer. Now, over 2 weeks, in fact, it was nearly 17 days later, after being trapped, all the boys were rescued. And the divers had to help the boys swim underwater. They had to go through rocks. They had to go through small passageways to get out of the cave and be rescued. It must have been really scary, and I expect the boys felt really scared and terrified. But do you know what? Adam, the little boy who was sponsored by Compassion, he said, and I'm going to read it because he actually said this. He said his faith grew even stronger as he turned to God during those awful moments inside the cave when his life hung in the balance in a dark, cold cave. So he said that his faith, his trust in God grew stronger because he didn't have food or clean clothes. They were trapped inside that cave, and he had to trust in God, and his faith grew stronger because he didn't have anything else to rely on. He had to rely on God to keep him safe and to help him. And he also said that help came from God during the hardest time. So he knows that God helped him during that really difficult time when he was trapped inside the cave. He said, I very intently prayed, and God answered me with his help. It was me and God together facing that situation, and I am thankful to him for helping me get out of the cave. So Adam knew that God was with him. He prayed to God. He relied on God for help during a really tricky time in his life, being trapped inside that cave. And he knew that God was with him and God helped him, and that God answered his prayers, and he was able to be rescued and rescued out of the cave and not trapped in the cave anymore. Now, this was a really big rescue mission, but sadly there was a diver who went to help rescue the boys. He sadly gave up his life and he died during the rescue mission. He died trying to help the boys get out of the cave. So he gave up his life to help those 12 young boys escape and get out of the cave. But sadly, he died. Now, that story, and it's a true story, but that story reminds me that Jesus has a rescue mission for us. Because just like that diver gave up his life to help those boys, Jesus has given up his life to help us so that we can be saved. He died on the cross so that we can be rescued and saved and forgiven. He gave up his life. If we say that we are sorry for all the wrong things that we have done, we will be saved and we will be forgiven, and we will live a life with Jesus forever. So as you think about the true story of that rescue mission, how those boys were rescued, remember God's rescue mission for us. Remember, he sent Jesus to die on the cross so that we can be saved and live with Jesus forever. And remember the diver who gave up his life helping those boys, rescuing those boys. Remember that Jesus has given up his life for us. So I want you to remember Jesus' rescue mission as you think about that story, and maybe you'll hear other stories about different rescue missions and different people being rescued and saved. Remember that Jesus has come to save us. I hope you have enjoyed this week of camp, even though it's been different to what camp would be usually. I hope you've enjoyed it, and looking forward to hopefully seeing you next year. Bye!